What if Hitler never launched his invasion of the Soviet Union? This alternate history scenario has been discussed countless times, often as a way to imagine a world where Nazi Germany wins World War II. Many see Hitler's decision to attack the Soviet Union as the mistake that sealed the fate of the Third Reich. So, if that invasion never happened, would history have taken a different path? Could the Reich have survived and dominated Europe? In this video, we'll explore that question. We'll consider what borders might have looked like, how cultures may have evolved, and what long-term consequences would have followed. But first, it's important to understand why Hitler invaded Russia in the first place, and why, from his perspective, it wasn't as irrational as we often believe today. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 is remembered as one of the greatest strategic errors in history. On the surface, attacking a country that had historically repelled powerful invaders like Napoleon seems reckless. However, in Hitler's calculations, the Soviet Union appeared weak. In World War I, Russia collapsed while France continued to fight to the end. He believed that if France had taken months to defeat, the USSR would fall even more quickly. Hitler even described the Soviet Union as a rotten house that would collapse with one strong push. At that time, the USSR faced internal turmoil. Stalin's purges had eliminated much of the experienced officer corps, replacing them with loyal but inexperienced figures. Millions were alienated by Stalin's policies, particularly minority groups like the Ukrainians and Cossacks. When Germany invaded Ukraine in our timeline, many locals initially viewed them as liberators, only to later face the harsh reality of occupation. From Hitler's point of view, in 1941, the Soviet Union seemed ripe for conquest. Hitler's broader vision also played a role. He never sought a long war with Britain or France. His plan was for Germany to dominate Eastern Europe, Britain to retain its empire, Japan to control the Pacific, and the United States to remain in the Americas. He saw the true enemy as the Soviet Union and expected Britain to eventually accept peace. For him, the Western campaign was a distraction from his main ideological objective in the East. In this alternate timeline, things would unfold differently. For Hitler not to invade the Soviet Union, his high command would need to convince him to delay the attack. This single change alters the entire course of the war. Instead of Barbarossa, Hitler would have two options: a Mediterranean strategy or an intensified campaign against Britain. There was a plan known as Operation Felix, involving Spanish cooperation to seize Gibraltar and Malta, followed by a push into Egypt and the Middle East. Capturing these key points could have cut off British supply lines to India and weakened their global empire. However, Franco's Spain remained reluctant to join the Axis, fearing economic ruin and retaliation from the Allies. Without Spanish support, this strategy would be difficult to execute. Hitler also showed little interest in North Africa in our timeline, sending minimal resources there. For this reason, the focus shifts to a direct assault on Britain. Operation Sea Lion, the planned German invasion of Britain, remains controversial. Many historians believe it would have failed, pointing to Germany's lack of naval superiority. However, in a timeline where Germany doesn't fight in the East, it could dedicate more resources to building landing craft, destroyers, and U-boats. The Luftwaffe, not divided by the demands of an Eastern front, could fully concentrate on destroying the RAF. With sustained pressure, Germany might eventually gain control of the skies. Even if a full invasion was still risky, the pressure on Britain would be enormous. The logistics would be challenging. Germany had to prepare thousands of barges to cross the English Channel, train troops for amphibious warfare, and secure air dominance. But unlike the Allies' D-Day in our timeline, Germany wouldn't face heavily fortified beaches. Britain's defenses in 1941 were makeshift, relying on hastily built obstacles and local militias. If Germany had months to prepare without fighting the Soviets, the operation becomes at least plausible. Meanwhile, the German economy would be stronger. Without the drain of a massive Eastern campaign, industrial output would soar. The pact with Stalin would continue providing vital raw materials, including oil, grain, and metals. With fewer Allied bombing raids, since the Luftwaffe wouldn't need to shift east, Germany could produce weapons at unprecedented levels. The Reich, in this scenario, would be at the peak of its power. Assuming Hitler still declared war on the United States in late 1941, the stage would be set for a very different conflict. By early 1942, Germany could launch Operation Sea Lion. The invasion might quickly overwhelm southern England, capturing London and Kent. However, Churchill's government would likely retreat to Edinburgh, continuing to resist from Scotland. The US would send reinforcements, creating a bloody stalemate across the British Isles. At sea, the Battle of the Atlantic would become even deadlier. With a stronger navy and more U-boats, Germany could inflict heavier losses on Allied convoys. Yet British radar and code-breaking efforts, combined with growing American naval power, would gradually shift the advantage back to the Allies. In the Pacific, the United States' heavy commitment to saving Britain would weaken its position against Japan. Without full American focus, Japan could win the Battle of Midway, seize Hawaii, and expand into New Guinea. Australia would face serious threats but remain unconquered due to Japan's strategic priorities. India, left underdefended, would see Japanese advances, though resistance by local forces and nationalist groups would eventually slow the offensive. Stalin would not stay passive. He hoped to strike Germany once it was vulnerable. If Germany invaded Britain, Stalin might seize the chance to attack Poland, aiming to expand Soviet influence. Yet, in this period, the Red Army lacked offensive experience, leading to disastrous early defeats. Germany would counterattack, seizing areas like Vilnius and possibly Kiev. However, fighting on two fronts, Britain and the USSR, would prevent Germany from replicating the sweeping victories of our timeline. As the war dragged on, the sheer industrial capacity of the Allies would begin to turn the tide. The conflict would last far longer, with Britain locked in a struggle for survival and Germany avoiding the devastating bombings that historically crippled its cities. The Soviets, learning from their failures, would grow stronger and push westward. The United States would ramp up production to overwhelming levels, eventually dominating the seas and skies. The final stages of this war would be prolonged and brutal. The Soviets would advance deeply into Germany, while the Allies fought to reclaim southern England or open new fronts in North Africa. Without a successful D-Day, Soviet influence in post-war Europe would be far greater. The dividing line between East and West might fall along the Rhine, giving the USSR control over much of Germany and Central Europe. The post-war world would look dramatically different. A stronger Soviet Union would dominate not just Eastern Europe, but much of Central Europe as well. Communist influence might spread to France or Italy, countries already with strong left-wing movements. The Cold War would begin with the West on the defensive, rather than holding the advantage.
In Asia, the war would also last years longer. Japan's dominance after Midway would force the United States to rebuild its fleet almost from scratch. When the US finally won, the delay would allow the Soviet Union to claim larger territories. Korea would likely be unified under a communist regime, and even Japan might end up divided. North under Soviet occupation, south under American control. China, still embroiled in its own struggles, might fall completely under communist influence earlier. This alternate history leads to a world where the war is longer, bloodier, and leaves a very different balance of power. Instead of an American-led post-war order, the Soviets would emerge far stronger, shaping the world in their image. Thank you for watching this scenario on What If Archives. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe and comment your own ideas for future videos. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.